What happens when a student's admiration for his teacher twists into a dangerous obsession? For 15 years, a man fantasized about his former algebra teacher, convinced they were destined to be together. One day, his delusion erupted into a terrifying reality. He abducted her and her 8-year-old daughter at gunpoint, planning to hold them captive in a basement dungeon. But when a 6-year-old boy witnessed the crime, he was also taken, escalating the nightmare. This is the chilling story of 53 days in captivity and a desperate fight for survival against a predator's twisted love. Before we step into the shadows, your support makes a world of difference. If you value these stories, let me know by liking this video. To join us for every haunting journey ahead, be sure to subscribe. I'm always humbled to see where these stories reach. So leave a comment with your city and what time the clock reads for you. Now, dim the lights. Let's begin.
What should the relationship between a teacher and a student be? Most people would say a mix of respect, patience, attentiveness, but certainly not romance. Yet, what happens when one side decides to imagine love in a place where it cannot, must not exist? This story is one of obsession and madness, and it begins decades earlier. Ming Shui was born October 15, 1950 in Taiwan. His parents were highly educated, his mother a respected mathematics teacher, his father a pioneer in forestry research. His father's intellect and reputation grew so large that in 1957, when Ming was only 7, the family was given their dream, a chance to move to the United States. Jim Shui was offered the position of head of the forestry department at the University of Minnesota. His wife Mary joined him as a math instructor at the same university. Their family, now living in Minnesota, seemed set for success. But tragedy doesn't ask permission. When Ming turned 11, his father fell ill and suddenly passed away. On his deathbed, Jim called his eldest son, young Ming, to his side. According to tradition, Ming was now the man of the house, the protector of his mother and his 2 little brothers, Charles and Ron. But Ming misunderstood. He didn't see his father's words as guidance. He saw them as absolute power. Almost overnight, the boy turned into a dictator in his own home. His brothers, only 6 and 3, became his personal slaves. If Ming was hungry, they had to prepare food. If he wanted his room cleaned, they scoured it spotless. Each afternoon, when Ming returned from school, his brothers were forced to greet him, remove his jacket, carry his backpack, and even remove his shoes. If one small detail wasn't perfect, even the number of crackers served with his soup, he would beat them mercilessly with a belt.
The beatings grew harsher with time, his cruelty sharper, their childhoods lost in forced servitude and fear. One day, during a fit of rage, Ming shoved little Ron, just 5 years old, into an electric oven and flicked the heat dial as punishment. The boys cried out to their mother, but Mary, broken and fearful herself, simply replied, "Ming is the head of the family now. We must listen to him." Instead of protection, the children were abandoned to his tyranny. By puberty, Ming's twisted desires escalated. He began peering into neighbors' windows, earning the label of a peeping Tom. But something darker burned inside him. He developed a disturbing obsession, not with classmates or girls his own age, but with his own mother. He forced his brothers to crawl into her room at night, attempting to touch her against their will. And when they refused, he beat them again. Eventually, young Ming went himself, sneaking into Mary's bed, cutting holes in her clothes as she slept, shining a flashlight to study her body. Even when his mother caught him in the act, she did nothing, either paralyzed by denial or terrified of her own son. By 14, Ming was setting fires and pelting cars with rocks. Authorities intervened, ordering a psychiatric evaluation. His mother finally confided his disturbing behaviors to doctors, including his obsession with her. Doctors recommended long-term treatment, but fate or error intervened. His paperwork was misfiled, and although labeled highly dangerous, Ming was discharged after just a few days. His chance for treatment lost forever.
High school introduced Ming to algebra and to the woman who would define the rest of his life. Mary Stauffer, his teacher. From the first day of class, Ming was obsessed. She wasn't just a teacher to him, she was everything. Caring, respectable, modest, and like his mother, she was named Mary. The similarities were too much for his fractured mind to ignore. He believed destiny had handpicked her for him. At night, Ming filled notebooks with fantasies, elaborate stories in which he kidnapped his teacher, only for her to realize she truly loved him. Their love, he believed, was fate. Real, eternal. And he convinced himself Mary secretly felt the same. But reality shattered his delusion. In 1968, Mary and her husband Irvin set off for missionary work in the Philippines. For Ming, it was betrayal, abandonment. His reason for living ripped away. He excelled at academics and sports, earning recognition as one of the most promising graduates. But as the years passed, his carefully hidden obsession festered. By his 20s, successful in business but isolated in reality, Ming spent every night in his basement, writing romance fantasies modeled after Mary and women just like her. Conservative, modest, motherly. He even drew inspiration from TV housewives of the time, like Florence Henderson or Julie Andrews. But every heroine, every woman came back to the same central image, Mary Stauffer. Then came the trigger. The mid-70s. Ming watched a film called The Teacher. It told the story of a teenage boy engaged in a forbidden romance with an older woman. A fantasy made cinematic. To Ming, this film wasn't fiction, it was prophecy. It confirmed what he'd always believed: Mary Stauffer was destined to love him. Years passed, and Ming lived in wait. When in 1979 he discovered Mary had returned to the US, his obsession erupted into full force. She was nearby, married, a mother of 2. But none of that mattered. He began stalking her at church, at lectures, during errands always unseen, but always close. And then, in early 1980, a devastating discovery: Mary and her family planned to return to the Philippines for years. To Ming, it was unacceptable. He couldn't lose her again. That's when his fantasies twisted into reality. He cleared his basement storage, attaching chains to walls, preparing a private cell with supplies. His plan: kidnap Mary, keep her hidden, make her love him. After several failed attempts, Ming finally saw his chance. May 16th, 1980. Mary Stauffer walked out of a beauty salon with her 8-year-old daughter, Beth. Waiting nearby stood Ming with sunglasses, leather jacket, gun in hand. Mary, ever kind-hearted, assumed he was only lost or asking directions. But reality struck in the worst way possible. He grabbed Beth, pressed a gun to her head, and barked orders. Shocked and terrified, Mary climbed into her car and drove off with the man she did not even recognize, completely unaware that this stranger had been fantasizing about her for 15 years. For Ming, the moment was supposed to be destiny fulfilled. Mary running into his arms after all this time. Instead, she didn't even remember him. The betrayal in his mind was unbearable. With Mary and her daughter now tied in the trunk, Ming drove into the night. His fantasies had finally crossed into a terrifying reality, and the nightmare for Mary Stauffer was only just beginning. The van was waiting, parked deliberately in the shadows of a nearby district. It was the next phase of Ming Zenshu's carefully rehearsed plan: transfer the captives, the mother and her daughter, from their car into his own. But something happened that he could never have anticipated. Something that would shatter the fragile control he thought he had. When Ming approached the trunk to move Mary Stauffer and her 8-year-old daughter Beth, their cries echoed through the stillness of the evening. Their screams broke the silence, and someone heard them. 2 boys. Playing in the nearby park, their laughter carrying through the trees like sparks of innocence, unaware that something monstrous was unfolding. One of those voices belonged to 6-year-old Jason Wilkman. Jason was bright, curious, full of life, exactly the kind of boy who always wanted to help. As Mary and Beth's cries rang out from the car trunk, Jason wandered closer. At first, simply curious, then worried. He saw something he was never meant to see. And in that exact moment, everything changed. Jason's eyes locked onto Ming. The child froze. The man froze. One was innocent, the other a predator now cornered. Ming panicked. Panic was never part of his plan. And yet when Jason stood there like a silent witness, Ming acted without hesitation. He grabbed the boy, shoved him into the trunk alongside the terrified mother and daughter, slammed it shut, and sped across the lot. Meanwhile, Jason's friend Timmy had watched the entire thing from just far enough away to stay hidden. Too scared to move, he waited until the car tore away from the scene. Then, running with everything in him, he found his mother and blurted out the unthinkable. Jason was taken. A man in a green car. At that moment, the nightmare no longer belonged to one family. Now, two. Police scrambled. A search ignited. A sketch of the suspect was drawn based on the little boy's description. Cars were checked. Neighbors questioned. The hunt was on. But by then, Ming was already on the move. For the first time, the cracks in his plan were beginning to widen. First, Beth, who hadn't even been meant to be there. Then Jason, the witness, a loose end he couldn't afford. Ming knew one truth. The longer he held onto Mary's car, the closer he came to being caught. So he made a choice so dark it almost defies comprehension. Driven by desperation, Ming steered them toward an isolated hunting reserve known as Carlos Avery Wildlife. He stopped. The trees loomed tall and indifferent. And then, with cold calculation, he pulled Jason from the trunk. No one knows exactly what went through Ming's head in those moments, but investigators later uncovered the grim truth. In his hands, an iron bar. With two brutal strikes to Jason's small head, Ming extinguished his young life. The boy's light, innocent curiosity gone in an instant. The body was buried in a shallow pit, hidden under leaves and soil. To the world, Jason had simply vanished. When Mary later gathered the courage to ask what had happened to the boy, Ming lied. He told her he left Jason somewhere safe, somewhere he'd be found. He didn't want her to think poorly of him. He wanted her of all people to admire him, believe in him, need him. But deep down, even she could feel the shadow of the truth. Hours later, Ming returned to the true stage of his nightmare, his home. A carefully prepared basement storage room that now transformed into a dungeon. Blankets, a bucket, chains bolted to the wall. Mary and Beth were forced inside. Darkness sealed them in. Beth wept. Mary, trembling, prayed silently, fighting every ounce of fear, desperate to remain strong, desperate to protect her daughter. She didn't know who this man was, didn't know why he'd chosen them, didn't even know if they'd still be alive by morning. Meanwhile, panic spread through the city. That very night, Erwin, Mary's husband, reported his family missing. Police quickly linked Mary's car with Jason's abduction. Now they weren't just searching for one missing child. They were searching for a family. The FBI got involved. Helicopters scanned the parks. Roads were checked. It didn't matter. Mary's car sat abandoned near the park. Beyond that, the trail ran cold. Inside the house, however, the nightmare was just beginning. 15 years. That's how long Ming had been waiting. When he pulled Mary into the room and set up a video camera, she couldn't understand. His face was faintly familiar, and he wanted her to recognize him. Needed her to. But she didn't. Not until he reminded her of Ramsey High School, of the algebra class she once taught. That's when the memory flickered back a struggling student, awkward, withdrawn. A boy named Ming who had once sat quietly in her room. Except to him, their connection was anything but ordinary.
Here was a man who had convinced himself she was the center of his universe, that a single grade, AB-, had destroyed his life, sent him spiraling into a world he now blamed entirely on her. His story was a lie. He had never gone to Vietnam, never become a prisoner of war. But the fantasy was enough for him, enough to make her his prisoner now. And so began her true ordeal. Every day, Ming fed the mother and daughter meal she loved because he had been watching them for over a year. Every night, he stripped Mary of her dignity, forcing himself on her, recording his acts to replay at his pleasure. Her daughter heard nothing. But when resistance grew too strong, he didn't hesitate to use Beth as leverage. Once, he pulled a bag over the child's head, daring Mary not to comply. The girl clawed for air, gasping, while Mary's heart cracked. To save her child, she kissed him. For Ming, that kiss meant power. For Mary, it was a scar that would never heal. The days turned to weeks, weeks nearly into months. Ming loosened his grip just slightly, allowed them out of the closet, ate dinner with them as if they were a family, even took them on drives, on walks, on a twisted vacation. From the outside, they looked like an ordinary trio. Inside, the gun never left his reach. And yet, even with the false freedom, the assaults never stopped. Each day, Mary prayed harder. Each night, she searched her mind for a way out. Until one day, she found an old dry cleaning slip with his address. Proof of where they were. Proof she made Beth memorize before she destroyed it. That single moment of defiance lit a spark. They just needed a chance.
That chance came on the 53rd day, July 7th. Ron, Ming's brother, was away. Ming, careless for once, locked them in a weaker closet. No furniture braced the door. The hinges were intact. It was all Mary needed. With trembling fingers, she pulled the pin. Slowly, carefully, until the door gave way. She and Beth, still chained, stumbled into the kitchen. With shaking hands, Mary grabbed the phone. And for the first time in 53 days, her voice reached the outside world. The police were on their way. Dragging their chains, they fled out the door and hid behind a neighbor's car. Beth begged her mother not to go back inside, terrified Ming would return. Minutes later, sirens cut the night. Officers swarmed the house, guns drawn, ready for anything. What they found was worse than they imagined. Mary and Beth were taken away, frail but alive. 9 kilograms lighter, their faces pale from darkness. They were at last safe. But Jason Wilkman was nowhere. The piece of the puzzle that haunted everyone remained unsolved until Ming was captured, arrested at his office, acting as if this was all a misunderstanding. The trial that followed revealed horrors even darker. The truth of Jason's fate, Ming's obsession with Mary, his attempts to silence her forever even from behind bars. He smuggled knives into court and slashed her face, leaving scars both visible and invisible for life. But even then, even bleeding, stitched with 62 lines of pain, Mary refused to bend. She testified. She stood tall. For Jason. For Beth. For herself. Ming Senshu was sentenced for kidnapping. For murder. Locked away, where he still sits. Scheming. Threatening that if he ever gets out, he'll finish what he started. But justice, for once, stands tall. And yet, the scars of this nightmare remain. A little boy's life stolen, a mother and daughter's innocence shattered, and a predator who believed love could be forged from violence. Mary Stauffer's story is not just one of survival. It is of resilience of faith when darkness was absolute. Of a voice that continues to echo, warning, reminding, and inspiring. Because some nightmares don't end when you wake up, but some survivors refuse to be broken. The deep scar on her face became a permanent reminder of one of the most challenging trials in the woman's life. But Stauffer didn't back down from testifying, and when the trial resumed, she did what she had to do. Ming Shui was found guilty of Jason's murder and sentenced to 40 years in prison to be served concurrently with his previous 30-year sentence in the correctional facility. Ming was undoubtedly one of the worst inmates. He was caught multiple times making homemade weapons. He attacked other inmates, threatened guards, and showed no remorse for what he did to Mary Beth. and Jason Shui refused any treatment and was eventually transferred to a maximum security prison while Ming served his sentence. The Stauffer mother and daughter managed to return to normal life. The entire family has planned move to the Philippines. Mary remained devoted to her faith and continued working for the benefit of the church and her community. For many years, Stauffer gave countless interviews sharing her story in hopes it would help other victims of violence. All these years, Ming remained obsessed with Mary. Now he said that if he ever got out, no matter how old he was, he would track her down and take her life. If Mary were dead by then, he threatened to take the lives of her children and grandchildren. But it's unlikely this criminal will ever be released under Minnesota law. While some legal systems allow for a dangerous person to be held indefinitely, Ming's fate was sealed by his sentence. He remains behind bars, where he can no longer be a threat. In stark contrast, Mary Stauffer's story of survival continues to inspire. In 2019, her ordeal was brought to the screen in the film Abducted, the Mary Stauffer story, cementing her legacy as a woman whose faith refused to be extinguished, even in the most terrifying of circumstances. And that's where we'll leave this story for today. My goal is always to bring these overlooked cases into the light, and I truly hope this one gave you a new perspective. If you find this work important, consider liking the video and subscribing to join our community. Your support is what makes these deep dives possible. Thank you for spending your time here. I have many more stories to share, so I'll see you in the next one.